Please join me in welcoming both Secretary Chu and John Knies to the stage.
Thank you.
We're
Right here,
Which one
whichever
do-
chair, whichever
okay.
you prefer.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming to the 2012 Biomass Conference. And I want to express on behalf of the delegates here, the sponsors, the organizers, and especially the excellent staff of DOE for your time and your commitment to the development of biomass and biofuels. I think we're all looking forward to your views and your comments about the challenges and the great opportunities for this industry, and especially about how DOE can help contribute to the success of this industry. As we said, it's kind of a fireside chat, so I want to get into the dialogue.
Right.
Those that know us both know how much we both like to talk, and I apologize I didn't bring my little timer so that we can keep moving forward on the agenda and the questions. So with that, Mr. Secretary, over the past year, we've seen a lot of debate and, in fact, dispute about our policies on development of biomass and biofuels. And I want to ask you, what do you believe is the single most significant issue confronting the industry today?
I think we need a little more stability and long-term signals. I think when one looks at all the attempts to take advantage of our great agricultural resources, it's not an easy thing. It requires time. As I follow the research and development of many, many projects, just to get to test plants or algae or this or that requires time, and it's sustained. It's not a 1 year, 2 year thing. It's a 5 year, 10 year effort. The promise is there, but I think the people who want to make these investments are craving for more stability, a 10-year, 15-year signal.
So what do you think then is government's role in doing this, for innovation, for investment?
Well, it's the same as any policy where you want to develop a nascent technology and there's incumbent infrastructure, incumbent industries, is that if you think this is the right thing, and I do believe it is the right thing, that we can, because we have such tremendous resources, and especially in things that where you don't really have to compete directly with food for fuel, what we call bioresidues, or grasses that don't have to compete with prime cropland, or in the case of algae, where if all works well, you can actually do it on essentially non-arable land. All these things require the staying power, so the government needs to provide somewhat of a draw, a market, again with a long-term signal that it's not going to go up and down depending on what happens every year, every other year, or every 4 years. And this is what has worked before in the past. If you look at all these new industries that were being developed, actually you can start with the oil industry, but it's also true of wind, it's true of solar, it's true of any important new technology. It needs stability and time to nurture and grow. But the target, always the target of the Department of Energy, is that we would want to be able to produce this at some time in the not too distant future without subsidy. And if we didn't think that was possible, I think I would personally not be as enthusiastic about this. Produce it without subsidy, but produce it in a way that really greatly decreases the carbon footprint of what we're doing, but also it is also bringing great wealth to rural America as well.
In the biomass industry then, what do you think are the major pathways for the development of this business? Obviously we want to get to cost competitiveness, particularly against petroleum, oil, or natural gas. So is it going to be bioenergy? Is it going to be biofuels? What about biochemicals? I'm reading a lot about companies that are moving toward that
Right.
because of the better margins as opposed to the low margin fuels.
I think that is absolutely true, that if you can, especially in the beginning years, create higher value co-products, where those higher value co-products, even though when you produce at scale will be easily saturated, you still need to get it going. And so a lot of companies are now saying, well, in addition to the ultimate goal of getting cost competitive, let's say cost competitive in my mind is production costs of gasoline of $2, $2.50, production costs. When you come in with production costs and your goal is $5, I think it's, this is, I'm not allowed to invest in anything, but if I ever leave this office, I would invest in that. but I think those things are going to be very important. Now, you mentioned what are the routes? There are many, many routes, and I can't really tell which one. I mean, each of the people doing these things firmly believe that their route is the right one. In fact, it's almost religious in how much they believe their route is the right one. But whether it's grasses or wood residues or this or that, I don't know. But your first comment about valuable co-products, that's something that many companies are realizing. That's a way to get it going, to make profit on something. Yes, it saturates, but it grows for the next 5 or 10 years, the investments, and makes it more valuable. I think that's a completely good way of going about doing this. A joke I used to say was, you don't, unless you have teenagers, you don't use gallons of shampoo a day, but you do use gallons of liquid fuels. So you will saturate, but it's much more valuable.
It's a good business model that way, yeah. We're hearing a lot of doubts recently about commercialization of some of the technologies, the challenges with cellulosic-based fuels, et cetera. How do we get over this valley of death from kind of a demonstration or pilot and then into a truly commercialized, and what's the role that DOE really has to do this?
Okay, so there are a couple of companies, including some supported by DOE, are starting on first generation commercial scale plants. There are other companies that aren't looking for government help. They think they can do it without, which is, my hat's off to them. That would be great. I can't really say who's going to win and who's not going to win, but actually, quite candidly, I would like several winners. And then we don't even know. Certainly, ethanol is a first step, but it's not viewed as the end step product. Biobutanol can be blended, uses the same, can be using the same pipelines, things of that nature. So that is going. And then ultimately, we would like precursors or immediate drop-in replacements for gasoline, jet fuel, diesel fuel. So that's the ultimate goal. Then the feedstocks are the other issue. It's much easier to start from simple sugars, but simple sugars cost a lot of money. And so there's a whole set of companies trying to develop, and research trying to develop ways to break down these very complex lignocellulose type materials into simple sugars in a very cost-effective way, or go directly from those complicated things into biofuels. So again, there's been great progress made, but when I was just the other couple of days reading a paper summarizing, for example, some of the efforts in order to introduce entire metabolic pathways into old organisms, to make it a new organism, and then to tweak those metabolic pathways so that you use most of the metabolic energy of the organism to do what you want it to do at a microbial, at a yeast level, but even at a plant level, you can start to reprogram. Very, very exciting research, but it's complicated and it's tricky. And again, I go back to the long-term view that the federal government says, look, we're here to do this, we're going to support this in a slow, steady way, but it's got to be at least over a decade.
So in dealing with a long-term approach like that, how do we maintain the sustainability of the funding in today's fiscal crisis? What are your thoughts on that one?
I think my thoughts are that this is a choice the country has to make. If I go back and look historically at some of the other times when we thought didn't think we were in deep crises, the United States came and did the right things. One of the most impressive things I remember is I don't remember this personally, I'm not that old, but during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln signed several bills. One of the most notable ones is the Morrill Act that started the land-grant universities, giving large parcels of federal land to start colleges and universities that would help practitioners of the practical arts, quote unquote, something like that. You mostly think of agricultural schools, but it also included engineering schools, and the great state universities got started this way, but also we should be reminded that MIT and UC Berkeley and Cornell also started this way. They were land-grant universities. And this was within a year of Gettysburg. We were able to start that during the deepest, darkest parts of the Cold War, when Soviet Union launched Sputnik in '57. What happened was this was a big shock because it really was disturbing that the Russian-German rocket scientists were better than the US-German rocket scientists. And, but instead of responding by putting more money into rocket engineering, Eisenhower and his advisors called upon Congress to say the fundamental problem is that Russian engineers and scientists are beginning to overtake us. Therefore, we should invest in the intellectual capital and nurture that, starting with elementary, grade school, high school, colleges. And so a huge science program started because of that. And I, among others, were a product of that Sputnik science program splurge. But that was the right response, the long-term view. The land-grant colleges were the long-term view.
Excellent. There was a recent announcement by the Department of Defense on cooperative efforts for advanced biofuels, biorefineries. What's the role of DOE in working with the Defense Department on developing these at a commercial scale, which is really the step that we need to take to demonstrate that they're truly viable?
So the defense in the past has historically been an early customer. But an early customer, there's a limited amount you can be an early customer if the cost of, let's say, jet fuel is a lot. So we are partnering with agriculture and defense. Our role is to emphasize the research and development, the piloting of new processes. Part of what we want to do is pilot something that has a pathway of becoming self-sufficient if you prove certain things, and you have to pilot it at a big enough scale that you understand how it's going to scale. But this valley of death you're talking about is, to go full commercial, it could be easily $500 million, $200–300 million almost as a minimum. A pilot is different. A pilot, you can be in the tens of millions of $50 million, something of that range, to say, okay, does this really have a chance? Get it off the lab bench and get it into something that then you have a better feeling of scale. So within the Department of Energy, because our forte is in research and development, we're partnering with them to help them on that end of it, to help them say, okay, this thing looks like it's got a shot. Let's pilot. What I'm less enthusiastic about is having us invest a lot of money in something which you say, well, if you invest in half the plant and buy down half the cost of feedstocks, then it could be commercial, but we don't see you getting the rest of the way there. So it's very important to us that we see the piloting and the further development as a way of getting to a situation without subsidy.
Is the main priority for DOE more towards cellulosic ethanol, or is it more toward the drop-in fuels?